when your life turns into a spiritual dumpster fire. I often use terminology like the unbinding process or unraveling, or as your life reorganizes itself or your energetics reorganize. Sometimes it feels like you're being rewired. I use this terminology, and I don't know how it lands necessarily, but I think sometimes people probably romanticize it, like it's some kind of blissful samadhi meditative experience. And while it could be at times, certainly, other times it's not at all. It feels quite unspiritual. It doesn't feel like any kind of meditative state. It feels like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what the heck's going on. This doesn't feel spiritual. It doesn't feel like anything's happening. Nothing feels like it's progressing. My experience doesn't look anything like what people talk about when they talk about awakening. And there's often just this kind of mucky emotional sludge. Like I don't really even know what I'm feeling, but it's uncomfortable. And maybe the word uncomfortable is really the sort of defining characteristic of what I'm talking about. This can just be a place of significant and sort of pervasive discomfort. Now, of course, it doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever, but this can stick around a while. You may go through, several days of it, or even intermittently go through it for a few weeks or even a couple of months. But I do ask that people be really honest with themselves too, because what can happen is we can kind of start telling ourselves stories about how it's just constant, never ending. That doesn't really help. Just look at what's actually happening. And almost always when people are going through this kind of mucky phase, this sort of spiritual dumpster fire, there are also periods of deep peace. There are periods of feeling really free in a way that you often don't, or maybe never have. So it's often a very mixed experience as well. But there are times when the overarching experience is one of just rawness, or feeling kind of like, the analogy that comes to me, I think is really good, is if you think of like a glass of water, but the water is like river water, right? Where at the bottom there's sediment or sand, and the sand gets all stirred up, and then the water's muddy. And like if you're inside that water, you're disoriented. You don't know which way's up. You don't know what's in front of you. You don't know which direction you're going in. You just feel disoriented. And often the mind will say, the mind's conclusion is, if I'm disoriented, if I don't know what's happening, if I don't know which way's up and which way's down, or what spiritual is or what mundane is, if I have no idea about any of this, it kind of can't be good, right? I mean, how could this be spiritual progress? But I have good news for that. And that is, this is spiritual progress. This is just how it goes sometimes. And the disorientation itself is because the ego that seems like it always has it together, that always knows which way it's going, it always knows it's in control, like all of those illusions, right, that are inherently delusive. But in this space, those illusions aren't accessible. Like you just can't tell yourself, I feel oriented, because you feel disoriented. You can't tell yourself you feel like this spiritual path is unfolding beautifully, because it doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels like a kind of emotional, mucky mess, right? And sometimes, you're just spending time like laying in bed, or, disengaging from the usual things you do, from people and from situations, and just kind of taking some time on your own, maybe spending time in nature. But sometimes we can conclude there that like, oh, this is a problem. I'm depressed. I'm not engaging in life properly. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, you just sometimes need a rest. You need a break, and that's okay. But yeah, this can manifest in a lot of different ways. You may also be functioning normally. You may be going to work like you normally do and taking care of your normal responsibilities. You just feel this heaviness, this kind of drudgery, this emotional sludge, this kind of disoriented mind. So this can play out all different ways, and there's no right way to go through it. But you'll kind of know when you're in it, and it just feels like murkiness, feels like you got kind of stuck in a blender. The emotions, the thoughts, everything's a little confusing. Also, you often feel raw, or like a kind of openness that makes you feel vulnerable and kind of fearful, but not necessarily like acutely afraid, but it's just kind of a general like sort of fear of life, like just not great, maybe some doubt. But this openness, this rawness, or sometimes I've described it as you feel like you're walking around without skin, like you don't have skin suddenly, and there's no defense mechanisms left. Like you can't really use the normal distractions and defense mechanisms that are usually available. In fact, that's probably really the core of it, is that what this is often the normal defense mechanisms and distractions that we usually use, they're just kind of not available, which is really a good thing. What you're learning is that you actually can function okay without the coping mechanisms, without the constant distraction, without the constant daydreaming. And even though that stuff can still be happening, right? Even in this state, there still may be some dissociation, daydreaming, mind wandering, distractions. But there's a part of you knowing now more clearly that it just doesn't really work. Yeah, it's not making you feel better like it's supposed to. And that's a good lesson to learn, that like, oh, I use these coping mechanisms, I still don't really feel better. So why? How about if I just feel it, right? Just feel what's here. So anyway, the reason I make this video is because I do know people going through this, and I've seen it many times. I've gone through it myself. And the news, the good news about this is it's okay. It's totally fine. It's par for the course. This is what happens. And the best you can do is to just ride it, feel it, stay with it. Stay with the sensations, stay with the emotions. Stay experience close. Trust the process. Trust that it's okay. Trust that you don't have to grab onto those thoughts. You don't have to believe the thoughts. Certainly don't have to amplify or magnify your experience with thoughts. They're just thoughts, right? But the feeling is there. There's something heavy. There's something murky. It's okay. So it's okay that it's there. Stay with it as much as you can. Be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself for it, right? Notice the judgments or thoughts too. It's okay to go through this. Totally okay. And in some sense, it's a blessing. And there will be times, this is how it evolved for me, there will be times when you start to recognize it actually is a blessing. This is actually slowing you down. It's life slowing you down and saying, okay, just slow down, let these coping mechanisms settle, let them fall away, let yourself see you don't need them in the way you think you do, let yourself just feel how raw it actually feels to be in a body. And over time, you'll get used to it. You'll realize like, oh, I actually kind of like this feeling of emotion, this rawness, this openness, this vulnerability. And then in deeper realization, it turns into non-dual, experience. It's like, oh man, I was running away from this the whole time with all these coping mechanisms, totally innocently. But what I was running from is actually what I want. What I was running from is my birthright. What I was running from is my natural experience, my natural state. And you reclaim it. So this is part of actually reclamation. It's part of remembering. It's part of recognition. It's all part of the deal. And so, like I said, be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Do your best to really engage the experience, like feeling it, and give yourself space. If you need to lay down, lay down. If you need to take some time off, take some time off, whatever it is. And rest. Enjoy the rest while you have it. Can't always rest, right? And if you don't have the time to rest, then, stay with the experience to the degree you can, even if you're busy and working and so forth. Just stay with the sensation, stay with the emotions, and you'll realize you actually can do that. You really can. So yeah, the emotional and spiritual dumpster fire that we're all going to go through, it is part of the deal with this, right? It is part of the process. It is part of unbinding. It is often what unbinding feels like, or at least sometimes what unbinding feels like. And it's totally okay. And there's no conclusion to make about it. It's an experience and it will pass.